Hi everyone, welcome to Stack Mastery. My name is Amir. I am a senior software engineer with around 10 years experience in designing web application. In this video, I want to start to talking about ASP.NET Web API. And this is the first episode of this series. There are gonna be a couple of more videos to cover all the information that I want to share with you about the ASP.NET Web API. But let's start this course with answering to this question: what is API? So as you guys can see in this diagram, web application context mainly divide to two sections. One is client and one is server. So a client can be a user's browsers, can be a mobile application, also it can be a desktop application. But something that is common between all these is that the client is the place that is sending requests and is the place that is managing the UI for users and run in the users machine mainly. And the server is consist of different things. So in the middle, as you guys can see, we have the backend, which is our main application. Also, we have web server here. So web server mainly is like a middleman between client and server. So web server is responsible for getting HTTP requests from client, sharing them with the backend, and once the backend has processed those requests and create a response for those requests, web server take these responses from backend and deliver them to the client. And backend itself is the main application, so is the place that all business logics or all the business rules also stay in the backend. And API, as you guys can see, also is a part of the backend. So API, we can say, is like a bridge. It's like a bridge between backend and frontend. So API exposes some endpoints that client through those endpoints can simply, for instance, request some data, or client can run some actions on the server through those endpoints to, for instance, create something maybe, or delete something, or updating something in a server. Then also we have a database here with backend also is responsible for managing the connection between the database and the main application to maybe store some information there or fetch some information from there. So I'm not going to talk that much more about a theoretical thing. Let's go and start actual coding. In the middle of the coding, I will share also more information with you guys. But in general, in this course, I prefer to actually do coding more and have a practical course rather than a theoretical thing. Okay, let's go to start actual coding. Okay, let's go for designing our first API. For this course, I have used Visual Studio 2026, which is the latest version of Visual Studio has been introduced by Microsoft easily. You can go to Google and search for Visual Studio. The first links appear through these links. If you go in, you will see a Get Free Download button. And if you click on this Get Free Download button, you will get an installer. And through this installer, easily you can install Visual Studio. So I have used Visual Studio 2026, the community version, which is totally free. Only thing you should keep in mind is that when you guys are doing the installing this Visual Studio, you should check this ASP.NET and web development section to install all those necessary things that you need for designing APIs and web application. Already I have installed Visual Studio, so only I escape this section. So let's open Visual Studio. So through this part, create a new project, we can create our APIs. So here I want ASP.NET Web API. So this is the type of the project that we need. So I will select it and click the next. So here we can enter the name of the project that we want. I want to name these food site, because I want to design some APIs here for a restaurant website. Is a website there people can order foods and they can see the food menu and some things about this. So I want to name this food site .api, and the solutions name I want to have food site as a solution name. Here we can specify the place that our project will store, that I want to put it in my desktop in my projects folder. So I will click next. In this section we can, in the first part, we can choose the version of .NET that we want to use for designing this API. Here .NET 10 is the version that we're gonna use, which is also the latest version, already has released by Microsoft, which is also long-term support. And I will leave rest of the things as default. We will explain them later. So let's click the create button and it will create our project in maybe a couple of seconds. So here now you guys can see that my projects folder has created. If we go inside it, we can see the food site project and folder. Here we have a food site SLNX file and the main food API project. This file in previous version, this used to be a food site.sln file. Now this has changed to SLNX. It's something that in this newer Visual Studio version, this one has changed. That is almost the same as before. So let's go to the project. So here I will explain about them later, and you can have more in detail information about each of these sections in the solutions. But right now in the beginning only I want to share a little information about each of them to have an understanding what this solution is and each of these sections what are doing and what are trying to show you. So yeah, first about these dependencies. So dependencies list all the external components that your application relies on. So this includes NuGet packages that you have installed here. I don't know, maybe the version of .NET your application is targeting. Also, you can see here, and some other things. So maybe the main part is here, that all NuGet packages, you can see them, which NuGet packages already has installed in this project. So we can see here that the Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.OpenAPI has installed. If you click right, go to manage NuGet packages, also you can see here which packages has installed here. You can, for instance, if you want to uninstall them or if there is any newer version to update there. And in the browse section also you can search for the newer version if something that you want to install to add to your project. So okay, this is the dependency section. The next section is properties. So in the properties you can see a launch setting that JSON file. So let's open it. So this file is used to configure how ASP.NET Core application runs on the local development machine, meaning your computer. So it is never included when publishing and does not affect production environment. It's only for local environment. And you guys can see here there are different multiple profiles, and each of them is for defining settings such as environment variable, as you can see here, application URL, and the command also here used for starting the application. And you can also add another profile if you need, and also you can change these settings if you want. For instance, in the launch browser section, it specify if when we are running our APIs, it launch a browser as default for us or not. So here is false, mean it's not gonna do it for us, which I don't want it actually here. Here we can specify the environment of our applications which is development in development mode, and in a command name also we can see the project as a value. So this mean that this profile for running gonna use Kestrel web server. So Kestrel is the cross-platform web server used by default in ASP.NET Core application, and it is responsible for handling HTTP requests and responses. We talked about web servers before, so Kestrel is a type of web server. Also, if you want, you can, for instance, add another profile here to use IIS Express, instead of Kestrel. But I don't want to change anything now, so we will close these. And here, this is the controllers folder. So in this controllers folder, all the we can have many different controllers, and in each controllers we can have some actions which basically are those endpoints that we are exposing, and users can use them for accessing and integrating with our API. So here we can have different controllers and different actions. Something that you should know is that ASP.NET Core provides two main approaches for building web APIs. So one of them is MVC and one of them is minimal API. So the MVC approach uses controllers and action for creating APIs, and it's offer a more structured and feature-rich framework which is suitable for large applications that require strong organization, filters, module bindings, and advanced routings. On the other hand, minimal API provide a lightweight and simplified way to define endpoints with very little configuration compared to MVC approach. Here in this course we will use MVC approach, and then we will talk about minimal APIs too, but initially we will start the course by MVC approaches. So this is a default controller that has generated by .NET, so we will leave this. Then we have app setting.json file. So this app setting file is the main configuration file for ASP.NET application. It stores all the settings your application needs, such as database connection strings, API keys, logging options, and any custom application values. Then we have foodsites.api.html. With this file, through this file, we can test our APIs. So now we don't want to test anything. Already we don't have that much API too. So we will use this file at the end of this course to testing our APIs. But right now we don't need this. So simply we can remove it from our project. So let me remove this. Okay. This file, program.cs file, is the starting point of every ASP.NET Core application. So, when your API runs, program.cs creates the application builder, register all services that your app needs, and set up, the middleware pipeline, that handles each HTTP request. So there are many things here. I don't want to explain all of them in details, but just to have an understanding what is going on here. So this is a program.cs class, but you guys can see this does not look like a normal C# class. So what's the reason? This is a feature the Microsoft named it top level statement, and something actually is happening here. This code is actually putting in a program.cs class, but those things we don't see them here. But when we run the application, Microsoft will and .NET will generate those details for us. So think that we have a program.cs file. In that program.cs file we have a static void main method, and these files technically will run on that static void main function, which gonna be the the first and entering point to to our application, so the application runs through that part. So here through this line, it actually creates the a web application builder for us. So then we can use this builder for adding services that we need to dependency injection container, and configuring actually anything that we need in our application. For instance, reading, for instance, let's say if you have some settings here in app setting and you're going to use them. So here in this section, through the profiles, you can read those settings and configure anything that you need through these builder things. So here, this builder.services.add controllers. So in ASP.NET by default is using dependency injection. So what is dependency injection? Dependency injection is a pattern that is using here for resolving all the dependencies, for instance, that are using in the application. I will talk in more detail about it later, but dependency injection has a container which work as a pool, as a warehouse, that for instance that you can add any services that you need there. Then when you want to use those services, so dependency injection first goes and check and see its pool to see that services has registers before there, and when it find it, so it take it from there and put it in the place that we're gonna use it. So here through this builder.services.add controllers, and so here typically we can in this section we can add anything that we need to dependency injection. So this builder.services.add controller typically add all the things that your application need for writing APIs in MVC pattern. Everything you need will add through this add controller, which is an extension method. Then we have builder.services.openAPI. So initially I should say, what is OpenAPI? OpenAPI is a specification for documenting RESTful APIs in a standard machine readable format. So is a document about your API, shows which endpoints you have and which HTTP methods has used for each of those endpoints, and how is how someone should request them, what's gonna be the response format, what's gonna be, for instance, the query parameters that someone should pass to call those endpoints, how gonna be an authentication requirement, anything about those APIs, will document them through this OpenAPI. Typically is like a JSON file or an XML file that shows diff information, and it shows the structure of your API. And then here, as you guys can see, so through this builder.build, the application get builder. So we build our web application. Okay, so by creating this web application object, which somehow represent your running API. So after this line, you can configure the middleware pipeline to define how the requests and responses should handle. So here in this section, we can set up our pipeline. So what is but pipeline? So let's say when an HTTP request came to your API, so that request should pass through this pipeline. So this pipeline is a series of middleware components that process incoming HTTP requests and generate responses. So and each request go through this pipeline by order. So order of these middleware is really, really important. And the middleware itself is a software component that are assembled into this pipeline to handle these requests and responses. And we can have many different pipelines. If you want, you can add something here, remove something here, or you have a custom logic also. You can write an custom middleware also for yourself and add it here. So here, for instance, we have this one. They use HTTP redirection, which is a pipeline. This this middleware will use for forcing all HTTP requests to be redirected to HTTPS. So ensure secure communication on local hosts. It uses a development SSL certificate. This is important for protecting sensitive data during this transmission. So here we have use authorization, which is for handling check users permission before allowing access to protected endpoints. For instance, sometime you have some endpoints that you need only some sort of users to have access to. For instance, only admin can see those endpoints, so you can check those access permissions here to see either the user has enough permissions or not. And the map controller, so the map controllers actually maps controller routes to the routing system. So without this line, attribute routes and nothing gonna work. For instance, here, so we have this default weather forecast controller. You guys can see that the route attribute here has specified to show that this is an API. And here you guys can see this is an endpoint in this API. And we can have many different also other controllers and many different endpoints. But if we don't put this map controller here, no one of those controller gonna work, because the MVC, the ASP, they're not gonna understand that they are there. And finally, app.run, which starts the Kestrel web server and begins listening for HTTP requests. It runs the application and blocks the main thread until the application is shut down. So let's start our application to see what it show us. For the first time, sometimes it take a little time, but the next time it get faster. So here you can see a console which give us some information. So here, for instance, is telling us that the application is running on HTTPS localhost 7183 port. So if we push the control button on our keyboard and click on this will open here. So obviously there is nothing here to see. As you guys saw, there were a default controller, this one. So if we take this part and we will go here, okay, we can call this and you can see some data about temperature and I don't know, these are some data that this endpoint is exposing to this part. But something that I want to show you, for instance, I said that this use HTTP redirection is for forcing all HTTP requests to redirect to HTTPS. So what's happened here? For instance, let's say here we have HTTP localhost. Let's copy this. For instance, if we have this one here, 5213, so and go to this one. Let me show you what's happened through this middleware to understand better what's doing that middleware for us. So here, if we go to the network section, so I want to refresh this to see. So here we can see there were requests to HTTPS localhost 7183 forecast, and the result was 200 okay. And here also we can see what as a response we got when we called this API. But here also, let's do it here. Let's go to network and call this. So here I don't know why it didn't work, so let me do another time. So this is localhost, this one. Okay, so now I have called it. So see what happened. I have called the the HTTP 5213, but it redirects us to HTTPS 7183. So what happened here, this middleware that we have put here redirect us from HTTP to HTTPS to ensure the security here. If we go to the network and let's get back to the previous one to see what actually is happening in details. So if we came here and if we go to this file, I want to remove here, everything is here, and then to show you what's happening. So here you guys can see the requests here. Okay, so you guys can see that this is redirecting us to another I want trying to show you this in this controller, in this network section sometime. I don't know why this is redirecting us to another section. Let me open another time to have this to see this actually, to understand better what is going on here. So if we copy this, have this here, instead of HTTP we have HTTPS, and what is the port? 5213. So if I have 5213, so here now we can see what's happening. So this was the first request. So in the headers section we can see this was the first request, which was to HTTP localhost 5213 weather forecast endpoint. So we call this, and as a result we got a 307 temporary redirection, and this one redirect us to this place, to this API, which is going to be HTTPS localhost 7183. So now we can see, so here we can see two requests in this network section, because the first request has, when it's sent to our API, this middleware, when understand that request is through HTTP, it's sent back another request and an HTTP response for the browsers to redirect it to HTTPS. This was, for instance, something that is happening through this middleware. Okay, let's stop this. And something else that I want to do here, as I said, this line is adding Open API documentation for us, but this at Open API is something that has introduced recently by Microsoft, but doesn't show us any UI thing about endpoints that we have. So only generates the file for us, but it doesn't show anything about and any details about those endpoints. So what I'm gonna do, I want to use another package which shows more information and shows a UI about those endpoints that already we have, and is more understandable in the beginning. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go to this package, through this to go to manage package, new good packages. Here I want to add swash buckle .asp.net, this one, swash buckle.asp.net core. So I will install this one. Yes, I will accept. Okay, so here, if we came here, we can add builder dot services dot swagger gen here. Okay, what it do, it create a, like a JSON file for us, which gonna be contain of all the information about our API. This one also generate those things, but because this line also will generate, so we don't need this one anymore. So I will remove this from here, and definitely also I don't need this part too. So I will remove this part here too, and here. So, and what is this line of the code? So here it says app.environment, that is development. So it means that we only need those documents when the application is running on development mode, not the production mode. So because we don't want to expose all those details to some people and they know which endpoints we have and have a lot of information about our endpoints. Only want to use this document in development mode to see, what APIs we had and something like this. So here, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna write app.use Swagger, then app.use Swagger UI. Here we have some options. So here, first I want to say where these Swagger files has located these JSON files, which is contain of information that I said. So I can say these options dot Swagger endpoint. Here I can specify the URL, which is gonna be in Swagger v1 swagger.json. Okay, and then we can also specify the name of this. So here we have, I don't know, food side API, for instance. Then say options dot route prefix equal to string dot empty. Okay, let's run our application, see now how it's different. Okay. Another time, let's open it. So okay, so now we can see the Swagger. So as I said, you can see now some details about the endpoints that we have here. For instance, you can see we have a weather forecast controller, and in it we have an API. Also we can see that this is through HTTP GET, and also we can call it here, so we can try it out and execute to send a request to this place and then see the responses. So the response was 200. Okay, and we can see what is the response, and so we can test somehow our APIs here through this Swagger. But let's go to actually design our first API. So what I'm gonna do, first I want to remove this model that is using by this weather forecast controller. Then also I want to remove this one too, because we want to design an API for ourselves. So here in this controller part, I want to add a class. So I want to add a controller with the name category, which this gonna be responsible for handling any APIs around our category. So for instance, in a food site menu, we have different category. For instance, we have pizzas, pastas, I don't know, drinks, and anything else. So I want to have a category, and the name of a controller should finish with controller term. So I should name category controller. So this is a must. Always you should keep this at the end. And I will create a class. So this is gonna be our class here. So what we're gonna do next here in this section. So this class should inherit controller base, which add anything that we need for having an API. I will talk in detail more about this, but now let's only skip this and have our first API. And here we can also specify through this API controller attribute to specify that this is actually an a controller, and some APIs are here. And here through this routing we can specify the routing. So in the route I want to say API, then the name of the controller. So this is an option we can have. So if we write this, it's gonna be API, this and a controller will access, it's gonna be accessible in the URL of API / category, because here we specify. So also we can write here API category. It's not gonna be different. So I will leave like this, API / category / controller also. So it will accessible through API / category. So here I want to write an API. So, and it's gonna be for instance a get all API, which gonna respond all the categories that we have. So I want to write public action result. So I'm gonna make it a void action. Let me just write action result. Okay, nothing more here. Maybe for instance, maybe we can have a list of strings here. Then I'm gonna name it get all, and like this here. Okay, so this gonna be HTTP get, which I will say later on what I mean by this. And here I'm gonna return a list of strings. So let me just create var result equal to new list strings, and here let's add some category. For instance, we have pasta. For instance, we have pizza. No, why it's going there? Also, we can have drinks, for instance, in this category, and then we can return this. So here also I'm gonna return an OK object, and in it I want to put this result. So now let's run our application to see this API. Okay, so now here we can see this API / category, and if we try this one, we can get this list of strings as a result. So now we can see that we have created an API. So definitely there are many things here that I haven't explained yet. But here the first episode will finish, and I will share a lot of more information about designing APIs in the next one. So thank you guys for watching this video. If you like it, just subscribe to the channel and you can get other videos. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.